Hello, everyone. Glad to be here today for this webinar about HVAC, so heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and cooling, and everything related with as a service, subscription, and as a service business models. I think very interesting topic to talk about, especially also with the recent, let's say, political situations that have been going on. And I think there's nothing better than a beautiful panel as we have here today with three key experts in the field of energy efficiency, in the field of cooling, in the field of pricing, and how everything works together. So very interesting topic where we will be talking and having different discussions and opinion about this. But for those listening also that prefer, let's say, a readable format instead of a listenable format, there's quite some content and resources and articles which can be found also on our website on the resources section for those that prefer, let's say, a readable version. But without further ado, I suggest that we start with the rounds of introductions to get to know who the different people are here, and then let's see in a very open way where the discussion is going to lead us. Perhaps Stephan, over to you.
Great. Well, thanks very much, Florian. I'll be your moderator today. I am Stephan. I'm a thought leader in pricing and value management, but I've done most of my career in manufacturing, and as such, I'm fascinated with the disruption in revenue and business models, and especially in these very traditional industries where you will talk about equipment, you talk about some systems, and old-fashioned industries, I would say. And now we are promoting innovation, which is always quite fascinating to me. I'm also the Chief Value Officer of Zillion, a pricing management software company, and we focus on quite a bit of disruption in pricing. So we have a great panel today. We're going to go through some questions on the topic of HVAC and cooling as a service. And I would ask Dimitris to introduce himself first.
Pleasure. Many thanks, Stephan, and thanks for the invitation to discuss such relevant topic. As you said, Florian, the sectors of cooling are really drastically growing across industries and regions. So it's great to be able to discuss this together with Stephan and Dawie today. So on my side, I'm for the people to know, my background is I'm a mechanical engineer. I used to work quite a few years in the private sector, about 15 years, and I work now close to 6 years with the Basel Agency for Sustainable Energy. And for everybody to know who is BASE, we are a non-profit. We were founded about 25 years ago by the Swiss government and the city of Basel, and we are a specialized collaborative center of the UN Environment Program. And back in 2017-18, we started an initiative that is called Cooling as a Service, that was to support really markets in adopting this approach that we will be discussing on this webinar today. So pleasure to meet you all.
Thank you, Dawie.
Yes, thank you very much, and thanks for having me. I'm also a mechanical engineer, so yeah, you're going to get a lot of engineering opinions here. I've been specializing in industrial refrigeration for the last 30 years. Currently, I'm the General Manager of Energy Partners Refrigeration. And Energy Partners as a business is an investment business with engineering background in the energy space. We do both refrigeration systems, steam systems, and then on top of that, power systems, wind energy, solar energy. And our goal is to invest in these energy assets and sell this on as a service basis to our customers.
Yeah, so I am not a mechanical engineer, so don't go techie on us, please. Not too much tech discussion today, because we really want to focus on the business model. Why today, out of the blue? We got smart buildings have been around for quite a long time, and maybe the energy crisis of 5 years from now, during the COVID times, and maybe that triggered the booming of maybe HVAC and cooling, because right now lots of companies are getting in the field, and you look at the investments that are being made in that specific sector. It's one of the, I would say, the emerging sector that is quite profitable in the future. So my first question to you is, what do you think now is the timing that we see a lot of interest on the energy side of HVAC and and others? Is there a particular trigger, you think, or is just normal?
Maybe I can jump in. I think energy has become such a big factor, both from a cost perspective, but also people being more aware of the impact of energy wastage and where energy comes from and the impact it has on the environment. So from that perspective, I think there's a lot of focus on that, and then obviously in the cooling itself, cooling is so important to the world. I mean, if you stop all the cooling in the world today, nothing works. We don't have data without cooling. We don't have food without cooling. We don't have airplanes flying without cooling. I mean, it's literally what makes the world go round. And that's why there's a big growth in that sector, and there's a responsibility on everybody who practice in that environment to make sure that it's done in the most sustainable way.
Yeah, so you're saying that maybe the latest efforts in ESG and sustainability has put that on the map a little bit more than before.
Yes, I do think that it has an impact in our country. I live in South Africa. Electricity, the cost of electricity has gone through the roof, number one, and number two, availability of electricity and good quality electricity is actually going down. So all those factors combine into people taking a real interest in how can they do cooling and heating, for that matter, in the most sustainable and also for their business profitable way.
Dimitris, you want to build on that? Yeah.
Completely agree. And just to share some figures with the audience, so cooling is estimated to triple by 2050. So there's really a massive increase across sectors. And we also know that in the built environment, I think cooling often represents more than 40% of the electricity usage in buildings. So when you are in countries where the electricity price is particularly high, or like Dawie mentioned as well, sometimes unavailable with blackouts, it's a topic that is super hot on the table for customers. Like, how can they either have a reliable amount of cooling or also reduce their OPEX? And so there really kind of efficiency on cooling and the type of technologies that you implement become really an important topic.
Yeah. And Florian, you've seen that it's not just South Africa, as Dawie was saying. We have a lot of shortages in Texas. There's a lot of discussion on electricity production in Germany. So, and that gets down to the consumer level with the bills, right? And but on the commercial side, these are big budgets that now you have to consider in OPEX that you may want to switch the way you buy, right?
Yeah. Yes, 100%. I mean, CapEx, no one is a big fan of having to spend big sums of money, right? So the CapEx is definitely draining companies. The interest rates are not necessarily favorable to big CapEx investments as well, which and I mean, with changes already happening in 2019, with what has happened with leasing and leasing having to figure on the balance sheet, makes, let's say, leasing and CapEx investments less and less attractive. And what we hear on the market also is these companies, those customers, but also manufacturers that are looking into alternative solutions of how to, let's say, free up their balance sheet and have as much as possible OPEX flexibility, transparency, reduce total cost of ownership. Those are some of the key insights that we hear a lot on the market. And this really doesn't matter where you look, whether you look on the European market, whether you look on the South African market, on the American market, or elsewhere. I think this is a trend, let's say, that we see across geographies.
Yeah, That's for sure. I think it's a global, as Dawie was saying, it's a global situation here, or opportunity or challenge. And as we just passed the 8 billion people on the planet, it's not going to disappear, right? Because, and that with the global warming doesn't make things very easy. But generally speaking, when you look at HVAC, and maybe less cooling around the world, but it's a traditional industry. It's been around a long time, 50 years, decades of heating and cooling and ventilation. Why is it now a trend towards more? Oh, wow! Now is a big potential, and we can start discussing other business models. Is that because of the cost? Is that because of the sustainability opportunity? But it's been around for a while, and the change is not going to be an easy one, right?
Yeah, I think, cooling has been around for 100 years in a mechanical format. I mean, it's a long time, and the first cooling systems were natural refrigeration systems, ammonia, CO2. But I think what is happening today is that the complexity of refrigeration systems and complexity of controls and the availability of data is something that is growing everywhere and a lot in the refrigeration space. And the technical expertise to maintain and operate these systems are actually declining. There are less and less people willing to work with their hands and to actually go and sit in a plant room and look after a refrigeration system. So technical skills is a big problem, I think, all across the world, and you'll see people with highly technically skilled people, moving across the world. They have massive job opportunities anywhere in the world because there's just such a scarcity of well-skilled technical people. And I think this is one of the big risks that owners of refrigeration systems has. And that's one of the things that as a service can address very effectively, because you now have the most skilled people and people who actually design and build the systems operating these systems, and that leads to much better outcomes. So that, I think, is one of the big things, combined with the massive amount of data that has to be crunched in modern systems to understand exactly what's going on, how the controls work, how can I optimize this, how can I do this preventative service in the best possible way. All of that is presenting, I think, a significant problem for the end user and a significant opportunity for service provider.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we've seen, you have a variety of let's say, arguments on the customer side, depending on the region you're in. So, but what we've seen is, very often customers, let's say, come under pressure because they have to reduce their OPEX. So they see that costs are increasing. There are, more and more uncertainties on the market. We see it also in Europe, with the impact that the situation on our borders is having on the electricity price. And so customers are seeking for solutions. They're seeking for ways to comply to regulation on one side, because that's also a topic the past years. Of course, we had more regulations on climate change. Now things are a bit less, let's say, getting softer, unfortunately, with the Trump administration. But the truth is that having the opportunity to shifting to another service model is a priority one, an opportunity to lower your OPEX. It's cherry on the cake that it's good for the climate, but number one, it's basically making your business more profitable as a customer. And I think customers have started to see case studies around the world and hearing other customers adopting this approach, and it's raising eyebrows and it's raising curiosity from customers. So that's really what we see creating this snowball effect, which is really good.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good, Florian, for you, the expert in subscription. I think you've seen quite a bit of companies now moving into the cooling as a service as a great opportunity, because it is a big market at the end.
Yes, no, definitely. What we see on the other hand is from a customer point of view, there's some reluctancy also towards as a service models. And why? Because sometimes they think it's too beautiful to be true. Like the transparency aspect of basically telling a supplier telling you, well, no investment and you will make savings as of day one, right? Like this is not usually how it worked, right? Like I needed to invest some money and then I had a return on investment period of three years or 7 years or whatever. And now we're saying, okay, don't spend anything upfront and you will save as from day one. There's some skepticism, let's say. And so what is very, very important, I think, in as a service offering is the transparency on the total cost of ownership, or we should say the total cost of usership of the models. And in the end, it's about trust, as in those business relationships of trust that the supplier is actually going to deliver, and then there's no hidden fees attached to it, that there is no being handcuffed for 20 years into a contract without any exit possibilities. I think the biggest enemy of as a service is the novelty of it and this not being used to that way of doing business. Because if you look at it from a logical point of view, it just makes pure sense. But it's 3 times the effort in terms of convincing customers of, let's say, being open to a new model just. And this is something that the go-to-market aspect, the education of customers on how to procure subscriptions, this is a very tough point because most companies, if you talk to the purchase department, to the procurement department, they like the idea, but then they're like, okay, well, I have this framework and it doesn't fit into my CapEx framework. So how should I account for it? How should I recognize the costs over time, etc.? And so there's just much more questions, even though it is a promising model.
But if you look at the industrial world, I mean, let's be frank. IoT has been around for 30 years, right? It's not new. We have lots of companies with digital platforms doing data management. Smart building is been around for a lot of time, and you have big players in the smart building space. So what makes HVAC and cooling different? What is the foundation? What are the requirements to make HVAC and cooling as a service adopted and successful, in your opinion? Is it different from other sectors? You mentioned Dawie, you mentioned skills and data. Talk to me about the requirements.
Yes, I mean, I can't say it's different from other sectors by much. I think there are some complexities and I'll speak about the space that I know very well, which is industrial refrigeration. There are some complexities in terms of understanding what should you be getting for every kilowatt of electricity that you buy in terms of cooling, and how do I know that I am actually efficient or not efficient, which maybe in other sectors are much clearer. So if I take, for example, a boiler solution, if I fire my boiler with gas, I know if I use so much gas, I should get so much steam out of that, and I can measure those two things very accurately, which is a little bit more difficult with cooling systems. I think if you talk about buildings, it could be more simplistic if you have chilled water systems, but that's not always the case. So it is a complex and unique type of system because every system is special and unique and designed specifically for a specific outcome, and therefore it creates, I think, a difficulty around understanding that I am efficient or I'm not efficient. And one of the major things that needs to be in place is an effective system to measure the efficiency so that you can then control it and show the customer, this is the efficiency that I promised you, this is the efficiency we're getting, and that all needs to be clearly communicated. And I think what is important, but Florian also said, I mean, this as a service solutions requires very good communication. It's one of the key things that communication with the end user and the relationship there is almost one of the service provider becoming part of the end user's business. You know, you have to have that kind of close relationship because you are directly affecting their profit and loss situation. So it's a very, very tight relationship, and it needs to be open and clear, and it needs to be accurate in terms of what are we getting out of this? Are we measuring correctly? Are we using the data correctly? So I think that's a very key component. And I think the second thing is the contracting side. Contracts needs to be very well thought through. It needs to be balanced. It needs to protect both sides, but it needs to be very almost kind of encompassing the whole system, because if something goes wrong, you don't want to have a big disagreement about where the responsibility lies. So it is those two things, I think, in my mind, you know, is what makes the refrigeration or the cooling side a little bit more complex. But it's not vastly different from whether you know what other products you servitize. I think it's whether it is electricity that's servitized or lighting that's servitized. The principles are the same. There's just a little bit more complexity in the cooling systems.
Yeah, completely agree with Dawie. And another point that Florian, probably you can also share your view on, because you've been touching on so many industries on the as a service space. But what I see as a commonality is that for providers to be able to deploy the model in the right format, they have to really know what is the inefficiency that they're solving at the customer side. An efficiency on the system side, on the operation side, basically solving a problematic at the customer side that yields also a cost efficiency improvement for the client. So we're not only talking about, you know, you don't always compare the same system A and B into an as-a-service model. When you shift to as-a-service model, you actually hand over, for example, that expertise to the team of Dawie, who knows their expertise is to design that system in the most optimal way. So they're not there to sell you let's say the more equipment, they're there to sell you the best outcome. Which is a completely different mindset than, you know, if you're there to sell material. A company selling materials will want you to buy as much material as possible. In the outcome world, they're there to sell you the highest efficiency possible, because that wins the contract with the customer. And that we've seen is applicable to all sectors going on the as-a-service space.
Yeah, and to add to that, sorry, the longevity as well, which adds to the circularity. So if I'm looking after a refrigeration or a cooling system for 15 years and it needs to provide me with good efficiency, automatically it is also in a good condition after 15 years, and we potentially would last another 15 years. So that's the circularity that suddenly gets built into the whole services servitization industry.
And this is where, Florian, the OEMs don't usually like this, because now you're not selling new machines or systems. You're really extending the life cycle of, which is good for some people, and then for others is that's part of the adoption issue, right?
Yes, but I mean, I think kind of the hidden word behind all of this is like programmed obsolescence, right? No one likes it. No one says to admit that they're doing programmed obsolescence, and hopefully they're not. But in the end, most manufacturing companies make money out of a product failing after a certain period of time, and then after 5 years, 10 years, they get to do a new sale, and this is how it's going. And so this is completely being revisited, rethought in as a service models, because the longer your products last, the more money you make. And so kind of this is why it's I think a beautiful thing, because it's sustainable from an environmental point of view and from an economical point of view as well. But I think to come back to your questions on what does it take to be successful, if you want to get started with as a service, I think the most important thing is to have a full leadership buy-in. At the very, very top of the company, there needs to be a strong willingness to go into, let's say, the Netflix model of their own industry, and to go towards recurring business. This is super, super important. Perhaps another thing is try to go towards standardization as well. I know that a lot of manufacturing companies are advertising with, we can make it super custom made for you, dear customer. But this is not helping them in the long run, because in the end, then they will need to have spare parts, individual spare parts for every single project, for every single machine. So I think standardization is quite important for as a service models to work. And then there's the other aspect, which I like to call like this ecosystem approach. I mean, as a service models are quite revolutionary, and there's partners out there that can help also with the financial aspects, the financing aspects, because most manufacturers are not banks or don't want to play as being a bank. So what do? Do you set up an SPV, a special purpose vehicle? Do you play the bank yourself? Do you partner with your usual house bank? Do you partner with a specialized pay-per-use financier, as they exist? So there's strategic alliances which can be created, which are very useful. There's certain law practices that are specialized in as a service general terms and condition in contracts. There's insurance providers. There's IT and tech providers that can help on the billing side. So I'm a big fan of strategic partnerships, and which help in going to the market as quickly as possible and collecting customer feedback, which I think is more important than, if I may say, the traditional manufacturing approach, which is, I want to build everything in-house and I want to own every single line of code and every single line of activity. So these are just a few points, but kind of in a matter of time, I'll not dive too deep into other.
Yeah, there's a lot of paper on your website that discuss that. So the last topic of this session here, we talked about data, we talked about efficiency, the calculation of efficiency, we talked about contracts, circularity, and I want to discuss outcome. So I'm a pricing guru. I would say I love to discuss usage, subscription, outcome. Do you think outcome-based pricing might be the best model for this business model in this sector, or is it more of a traditional subscription, or is it hybrid? What's your view here on the right revenue model?
Sure, I think it's almost one of those questions that there's no right answer for, and so I think you need to look at the customer, and you need to look at your market and how you're doing it. As a service, pricing models got to reflect the primary goal of as a service, and that is risk transfer. So one of the things that we are doing with cooling as a service is transferring the risk from the end user to ourselves, and the pricing model should reflect that, because so there should be some upside for taking that risk, but there should also be downside when the risk plays out against the provider of the service. So from our perspective, any pricing model that are fixed or predictable in that space doesn't really bring the advantages of as a service model. So really a model where you pay for the service that you get, and when you don't get the service, you don't pay, that makes a lot of sense. One can combine some of these pricing methodologies to put in things like a fee that is linked to having the asset available on site, whether the customer then use it or not, that then becomes a usage fee that's charged on that. So I do think there are many ways of doing this, and I'm talking just from our perspective. I know Dimitris has had a lot more experience and working with other pricing models than ours, but certainly I think you need to link it to the output that you provide. That is key in this pricing model.
Yeah, completely agree. And it's like that we mentioned, like, it's a conversation you have with your client, and whatever you see is in alignment where you can bring value to your clients, then that would be kind of the best fit for the pricing in that scenario. We've seen like that we mentioned, like pricing schedules that have a combination of a fixed fee and a variable fee, and the fixed fee is justified indeed by having access to this asset, to this output of this asset, and then the variable one is really kind of linked to the consumption of the customer. Then we've seen other pricing models that are also completely variable, and that of course is also more risky for the provider to deploy it. So it means also, okay, is it for slightly smaller investments? Because of course, if you deploy an asset that is worth more than $1 million and you have a fully variable fee, also your investor that is supporting your activity is going to tell you, well, here, red flag, that's not really good. And usually also those customers, the customers that will have an amount of fixed fee and variable fee, they accept it because they know that their business will always need a certain amount of cooling. Otherwise, it means that they go out of business. Like if we look at a data center, they need a base load of cooling no matter what. A dairy factory, they need also a retailer, same. And when you shift to the fully variable model, let's say, which could be applicable, for instance, in real estate, there, what is important for the providers going in this direction is to make sure that they have enough customers operating and a diverse type of customers, so that this consumption changes from customer to customer. It's a bit like the stock market. You don't want to be investing in the same type of companies. You want to invest into variable ones. So if one goes down, the other one goes up. So there's no right answer like that we mentioned, but it depends on your company and your market.
No, that doesn't make it easy, but that makes it profitable if you do it well, right? Florian, you're an expert in as a service, and you do all the customer insight work, the value proposition. What is your view on that?
I was thinking about it, and to me, it comes down a bit to four pricing mechanisms that we usually see out there. Like there's pay-per use in the end, which would be paying per machine hours, running hours. In the end, this is one metric that we see a lot. Another one being pay-per output, as you mentioned. So this can be the tons processed. This can be the number of parts that have been cut, or the kilowatt hours that have been generated, for instance. Then we have more of a traditional, let's say, a pay-per availability. So this is more a fixed subscription fee for certain uptime that you have, let's say, achieved, but a fixed fee over month by month. And then there's kind of pay-per performance. And I think the pay-per performance is a tricky one because this is usually it has an improvement connotation in it, right? So imagine you achieve a certain efficiency improvement, a certain savings improvement. This can be remunerated as well, but usually it's one of those four or a combination of them. So what we see a lot is those hybrid models where there's a fixed base fee and then some variable fee, as Dawie and Dimitris said, where to de-risk it basically, because on the other side, what you don't want to have, imagine a situation where you have two air compressors. One has been purchased in the traditional way, one is under an as a service contract. you don't want the customer to only use the as a service one if the other is at full capacity, let's say.
Yeah.
So you have to de-risk it from a supplier point of view as well. But I think the important thing, that the metrics, they need to be measurable and transparent. They need to, as Dawie said, they need to correlate with the success factors of the customer. And perhaps last point, they need to be scalable. So there needs to be some tierings for growth. So this is why also we have those good, better, best packages that we see a lot happening. So this is what I would say to pricing.
Wow, so lots of information we've given to the audience. I mean, we could go on for a couple of hours on this topic, and it is a booming topic. I think it's very interesting, very technical. But I think that's all the time we have. I want to thank you guys for sharing some of your knowledge. I think we should do another session, all of us together. There's so much to discuss. Fabien, you're going to have the last word, and thank you again.
Thank you, Stephan, for moderating this. Thank you, Dawie, Dimitris, for joining today to talk about this. Stephan, as you said, I think as a service models, especially in HVAC, in cooling, in everything that is, let's say, energy consuming, this is something we see where there's a lot of traction. Energy consuming means that savings can be generated, means that a case for as a service can be more quickly calculated, let's say. So I think this is it's an interesting space to be in, but happy to discuss also offline with some of the listeners about as a service ambitions and what it takes. But I cannot stress enough the importance of the leadership commitment for making this work, because if there is none, then this is definitely not going to fly. But thank you to everyone involved, and then wishing everyone a great remainder of the day, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Perfect. Okay.